this on? Yeah. That was a prayer I prayed on the 700 Club last year. And I thought I should show again to you guys tonight. I've already said we're doing trauma training, trauma counseling in Israel. We're trying to rebuild the kibbutzes in the Gaza envelope. Adele Raymer, Abby brought her to campus, and she really inspired me with her determination to rebuild her kibbutz. We've made a commitment to rebuild the dining hall. They had a grocery and a kitchen, all of which is essential to having that kibbutz come back to life. So those plans, we announced that on today's show at 9 o'clock this morning, is what those plans are to do. But there's just an incredible amount of need in Israel today. At the same time, an incredible resolve. So let us turn to the panel. And Aaron, you were there. You were shooting a film, Oracles of God. And what was your impression right after October 7th?
Well, that morning, we still didn't quite know what was going on. We still thought, oh, maybe it's just a few rockets and it'll die down. But as we started to hear the stories that she told from the South, I got together with my producers and said, no one's in the headspace to handle this. Literally everyone on my crew immediately went into volunteer mode. And it wasn't something that anybody told them to do. It was instinct, almost like animals have an instinct to do certain things. The Israelis had this gut instinct, I have to help. I don't even know who I'm helping yet. My crew were cooking meals for people. They didn't even know where the meals were gonna go. They just started cooking. Or they started working on PR, or they started matching people up. The Israeli army multiplied so quickly that the IDF was not prepared for everyone yet. So they needed uniforms, they needed mattresses. They were begging, can we just have a mattress? We don't even need blankets, just give me a mattress. They needed food, and every citizen in Israel went immediately into that. You'd walk even in Jerusalem, where it's a little bit more removed from the war, you would see people, packing the stuff in their car, blankets and clothes and hauling things. It was the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen, really.
You went back and restarted the film, but as a result of the attacks this week, is that going to continue?
Yes, absolutely. Look, this thing's been delayed by COVID, by Hamas, by Iran, Hezbollah. We're not quitting.
All right.
It's going to get
You
done.
just got out. I mean,
I did. We both did.
When did you leave?
I left on Friday because Chris and I both had European Airlines, and they canceled on us the day before. Said, sorry, you're done. We're not flying there anymore. And so my wonderful producer got on the phone, and she got me the last seat on an El Al flight. But she said, you have to go tonight. So we were shooting all day outside. I came home at 9 p.m., took a shower, threw some stuff in the suitcase, got back to the airport at 1 a.m. and got out. And then went to France and to England, then to New York. So it's been a roundabout trip, but not as bad as Chris's. Chris
was there when the missiles were coming in. What was that like?
Well, I was at the Bureau, and knowing I had to leave the next day, and all of a sudden, the big news at the time was that the IDF was going into South Lebanon. Then all of a sudden, within a few hours, the big news was we're under attack in a few hours. And I was actually on my way to, where Fakasha is. It's a restaurant in Jerusalem, to pick up some spaghetti. And on my way, the sirens
Life
went
goes
off.
on.
And so I had to make a quick split decision. Do I go get the spaghetti, or do I go in the bomb shelter? And
Tell me you chose the pasta.
Which one?
I chose the bomb shelter.
Okay.
I did get the spaghetti later, but I spent about.
Was it still hot?
What's that?
Was it still?
No, they canceled that order because I didn't show up, and I ended up, and they cooked me another one. But I, like probably about 10 million Israelis, were in a bomb shelter for about an hour and a half, and it's certainly disconcerting. And miraculously, hardly anybody was hurt or damaged. And that the same thing happened back in April when Iran fired 350 projectiles. And so God, like the Psalm
But that
says,
was a different attack. Those were mostly drones.
A lot of drones, yeah. These were ballistic missiles, and the Iron Dome and the David Sling and the Arrow, which can knock out missiles above the atmosphere, were in action, and it really was a miracle what happened. I would say on October 7th, I was in my office, and actually Liz woke me up, and she said, do you hear those things? And so it was the combination of the rockets, the Iron Dome, and the missiles. And I would say after October 7th, some of the three things that really hit me, about a week after October 7th, we went down to Kibbutz Be'eri, where Michelle Bachman volunteered right after high school. Also Kfar Aza, where you were. Mm-hmm. And you just see these idyllic communities were just devastated. And in Kibbutz Be'eri, you could still smell the death, and you heard the stories. And then after that, we not only saw there firsthand, but the IDF made a opportunity for foreign journalists to see about a 47-minute video of raw footage from October 7th. And so I went partly because I felt the responsibility to be an eyewitness, to say this did happen, because within days, people were denying it. And I felt after I came out of that, I was on my way back from Jerusalem after seeing this 47 minutes of raw, horrific footage. And I really felt the Lord said, honor them, the ones who died, the ones who were desecrated. They weren't just murdered. They were humiliated. They were desecrated. They were butchered sometimes, just horrific stories. And to honor them. And the other thing that really hit me was after that was going into the tunnels. We went into Khan Yunis, and we went into one of the tunnels in Gaza and got to see the extent of the construction that Hamas had done for decades, these 400 miles or more of tunnels. And we got to go into the tunnels where some hostages were, because they knew 12 were in there, 3 had been released in November. And we got to see their conditions. And when we were in the tunnels, the general who was giving us a tour asked all the cameramen to turn off their lights, and they did. And it was just pitch black. And she said, well, this is what those hostages are experiencing. And I went in with a number of journalists, including Joel Rosenberg. And when we came out, we had the opportunity to take communion and to pray that God would redeem this land that had been so desecrated, and to pray that God would somehow use good out of this wicked evil.
Yeah, that's the end of the Song of Moses, which is the Torah portion this week, that I will atone for the land and its people. That's a good prayer. That's a good communion service.
I would say too, Gordon, October 7th was a really demarcation. And I think we as a people, we as believers, it's our Dietrich Bonhoeffer moment to stand with the Jewish people in Israel. And I just want to applaud you for your commentary throughout this past year has been just amazing. And the Jewish people, and the Jewish people recognize that and see that. And it's a time to stand with them and stand with Israel. And they realize standing with them. And when the world is turning against them, they realize it means so much to them. It touches them so deeply.
Well, it means so much to me, both in terms of the pledge that my father took, that all the organizations he founded would always stand with Israel. But then it really came home when I'm in Kfar Aza, and I'm standing with the brother of a young woman. She was just 23 years old. And we're in her house in the very room where she was murdered. And he's telling me the story as I'm looking at her bloodstains on the couch. And it will never leave me. We need to stand with Israel. And we need to bear witness to what we have seen and what we know. Okay.
May I echo what Chris just said? Because he and I run in very different circles, but I'm also seeing it. we got to the point of we were ready to start our movie 3 days after October 7th. And I had a moment with God where I said, why did you bring me over here and get me through this whole pre-production and then slam the brakes on it? Why now? Why was this? And I have felt ever since how important it was. You might not want to be in Israel on October 7th, but how important it was for the people I work with that I was there. And wasn't there, on purpose, like, oh, I'm going to show up for this. And even when I came back this year, my assistant makeup artist gave me this giant bear hug, and she said, thank you for coming back. And I said, it's our job. We're doing the movie. And she said, no, no, no. It's really important that you came back, and thank you. And let me tell you, they are seeing it. They are seeing that the Christians are with them. There's something going on. I was talking to Dean Bachman earlier. She's dealing with the Jewish community here, and I in Israel, we're seeing the same thing. There's such an openness to Christian people. My cast are asking me, they're playing Jesus and the apostles, so they're asking me a whole lot of questions. And they say to me, one guy said, are you a Christian? And I said, yes. And then he looked at me and he said, are you a believer? And I don't know why he was making that differentiation, but I said, yes. So they're wanting to know backstory on their characters. And I'm sitting there like a Sunday school teacher telling them Bible stories, and they're fascinated. And they looked at each other and said, why haven't we heard this in school? This is amazing. The guy that plays Peter is very fascinated with that character. Why is he's talking all the time, and then he's the first one to run away, and what's his deal with John? And it's really fun. There is a real openness, and there's a real sense that we are with them. They see it and they know it.
Aaron does in a different circle, a very secular Israeli community in this production company, and Aaron is a light.
Actors,
What's that?
They're all actors. What do you say?
No, and Aaron, we have the privilege of Aaron coming over on Fridays to the bureau, and she gets to hang out with us and pray with us, and we pray for her that she would be the light, and she is that light to this production company.
But here's what his office did. I was telling them these stories, and Cindy Lou, a member of his staff, said, oh, you know what? I know where I can get you copies of the Gospels in Hebrew. You can give these guys to study more about their characters. And sure enough, the next day I got there, she had left this big bag of Hebrew Gospels. So I took them in, and I said to these guys, all right, here's more about your characters. Don't tell anyone where you got this. They will kick me out of the country for being a missionary. So they started laughing, but they took the books. When people are being polite and when they're really touched. They took the books, and the young man who's playing Jesus in our production, he said, wow, it's in Hebrew. Wow, I can keep this? This is for me? Wow, thank you so much. And every day on the set, he comes and he gives me a big bear hug, and he says, I really love you. Thank you for letting me part of this. I mean, it's something's happening. So thanks to your office, was also playing a part.
Yeah.
All right. I heard that during the tour of the News Bureau this morning, there were a lot of questions that you had specifically about Israel. So tonight, I'm going off script, and I'm going to open it up if you've got questions. So if you've got it, just raise your hand. We'll get a mic to you. And while we're waiting on that, I've got to give a shout out to Michelle Bachman,
Yes.
the Dean of the Robertson School of Government at Regent University. And there's Michelle. You got to stand up. The Jerusalem Post honored her this week as the #1 out of all the Christian Zionists in the world. Michelle Bachman listed in the Jerusalem Post this week as the foremost Christian Zionist in the world. So congratulations. And Regent just kicked off just last year, the Israel Institute. We've had a couple of seminars. She brought the former U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, to campus. His brand new book, The One Jewish State, which is such a sea change in American foreign policy, and really groundbreaking for him to announce that on campus. I made a joke with him, and I said, the longer I'm a Christian, the more Jewish I become. And he turned to me and said, well, I'm actually starting to find myself leaning towards Christian, which is a fulfillment of prophecy, that there'll be one new man, which is really awesome. All right, who's got a question? You guys know all, you see all, the Spirit of truth has revealed all things to you. You've got to have prophecy questions for Chris. Can we get a mic here?
Mike Kirshner.
You mentioned, can you hear me? Yeah. Now you can. You mentioned the sons of Jacob and the sons of Ishmael.
Sons of Isaac and the
Isaac,
sons of Ishmael, which is the basis for the Abraham Accords.
I think focusing more on the Arab community and lifting up their identity as sons of Ishmael, to introduce them to what God's plan really was and how Christ is the fulfillment of that plan, is an awesome challenge. It's an awesome opportunity. We don't hear enough in media about what's going on with the Arab community in terms of, what are they thinking? What's going on here? They just want to hate Israel. They want, we're the great Satan. Israel is a Satan. There's got to be more to the story that can be told to bring kind of a fruition of bringing it all back together. Listen, this plan's working out. It's for you too.
Well, they self-identify, the guardians of Mecca. I won't even try to pronounce the name, but what they march around every year as part of their pilgrimage. The guardians of that claim direct descent from Ishmael, as does Muhammad. He said he was. So they changed the story. Instead of Isaac being sacrificed, there's some pretty key differences, and then within the Quran, there's the challenge to, if you see a Jew hiding behind a rock, kill him. There's, they're descended from apes and pigs, and all of this is unfortunately part of the theology. And so when my father got criticized for it at 9/11, saying, well, these Muslims are actually good Muslims. They're acting out their belief, and they think they're striking a blow for Allah. He got profoundly criticized for that. And it's unfortunate in the West we don't understand, well, he was really right. And the core root of the ideology is a very strict interpretation of the Quran and of Islam. And how do you come against that? And for me, the only way to do that is conversion. They've got to leave it. They've got to understand, that it's not the way. And if you go die in jihad, killing innocent people, you're not going to go to heaven. And that message just doesn't seem to be getting through as much as it should within the Middle East. I think there are some cracks in it. CBN is the largest producer of Christian programming in Arabic in the world, largest in Farsi. There's a whole lot that we're doing to advance that. But you look at some countries like Malaysia and particularly Indonesia. My prediction is Indonesia, instead of being the largest Muslim population in the world, will become a Christian nation by 2050, if not earlier. It could be as soon as 2040. That as Muslims look at terrorism and look at these barbaric acts, if that's what my religion requires, I don't want it. and they're looking for alternatives. And so now more than ever, we need to be there to do that. In Bible prophecy, we're in the times of the final ingathering of the Gentiles, of the nations, and all the nations of Islam are well within that group. This is our time now more than ever to preach the gospel. And Ben Edwards, that nice segue, is going to have plenty of more on this tomorrow morning. Anybody else have a question?
Chris, I just wanted to know, what day do you expect Jesus to land on the Mount of Olives?
I don't know.
And
that.
could you give us the hour?
Go ahead.
No, seriously, how is the economy of Israel doing with all the men under arms, all their people out in the reservists? How are they doing economy-wise and morale-wise in Israel?
Yeah, we did a story that was actually on Monday's C100 Club promoting the genius of Israel, and we interviewed Jonathan Medved. He's the head of Our Crowd, the CEO, and he manages probably the largest crowdfunding for Israeli startups in Israel, or if not the world, and works a lot with believers, Christians. He was saying that despite the war, that the largest segment of the economy is booming, which is the startup and the high tech. The other parts, like tourism, has been devastated. Agriculture is hurting. So the other parts of the economy are really hard pressed. But tech is doing amazingly well, and even better than America, and better than it had been.
Yeah, the agriculture has been devastated. The Gaza envelope produced 60% of the fruit and vegetables for Israel, and they exported a great deal of that into Europe. That has all been decimated. And there's actually danger that the crops, the trees have been damaged because they weren't properly harvested. Mm-hmm. So it may take years for that to recover. There was another story we ran this week that really cheered my heart, because there's an Israeli startup trying to work on traffic jams, and they've got these cameras on the roadway that are hooked into what's called a SAM, which is a version of a AI that has a limited, it's not going out into the internet, it has a limited database to look at. And in that, it's able to give green lights in order to relieve traffic jams, and then warn individual cars to take different routes, because those cars are now plugged into it. And then most importantly, if there's an accident, they're able to green light the entire route for emergency personnel to get there first. So I'm going, yay, Israel, that'll help us a whole lot.
Yeah.
And if it's adopted worldwide, it reduces all kinds of emissions. And yeah. You got to love Israel. I mean, it's the amount of innovation coming out of Startup Nation is truly incredible.
Yeah.
Anybody here use Waze? Israel. Unfortunately, Google bought it, which, come on. But iPhone?
iPhone, Kindle, iPad.
The antenna in every phone.
Your remote printer, wireless printers, flash drives.
Yeah, USB. Mm-hmm. To the second part of your question, Mike, the morale, I think Israelis are remarkably resilient, and despite all the things going on, and you saw the video, Israel is really a family, so everybody was affected by October 7th. Everybody is affected by the war. They have a son or a daughter or cousin or a nephew or a father or mother in the IDF right now, serving on the northern border or in Gaza. And so the trauma counseling is so needed right now, because it is a hurting emotionally nation, and yet they persevere and they keep going. And one other thing that we need to realize here in the States, because if we send, our soldiers, it's halfway across the world sometimes, they're fighting maybe 2 hours from home or less. And so it's so immediate to them. So they know there's no turning back. They have to fight for their families and their homes. And right now, it's, as we all know, in the last few weeks, it's been remarkable achievements, what they've done militarily. And we'll see perhaps in the next few days or weeks what they're going to do against Iran itself.
Do you have a prediction?
Well, Benjamin Netanyahu said something very cryptic the other day. He had a message directly to the Iranian people. And he said one thing where he said, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, freedom will come to you sooner than you think. And if after this attack, the second one directly against Israel, they could go after the nuclear sites or the oil facilities, but maybe they'll go after the regime itself. Yeah. And just like they did against Nasrallah, and they've eliminated almost the entire top leadership of Hezbollah. And so I'm not predicting, but it would be a game changer for the world.
Well, they showed the capability of eliminating a top Hamas commander in
Tehran. Yeah.
They knew exactly what apartment he was in and when he was going to be there. And
yeah. So it seems like they have the capability. Yeah.
That would be a different world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Anybody else? Yeah. Wait for a mic.
I have a question. Oh.
Okay.
And it is, what is the significance of the red heifers?
Chris, you want to take that one on?
Okay. So in Numbers 19, there is a verse that says, the ashes of the red heifer are necessary to purify the priest. So they, the Temple Institute in the last couple of years asked a man named Byron Stinson, a Texas man, to find red heifers that are without spot or blemish. They cannot have a white hair, they cannot have a black hair, they can't be in any way defective. And so I believe it was a year ago, September, that they brought over 5 red heifers that were pure and kind of without imperfection. I just talked to Byron a few days ago. 2 of them have been disqualified, but 3 are still qualified to be the ashes of the red heifer. They're important because the ashes go into water from the Gihon spring that can be sprinkled to purify people from anything they've touched that's impure or dead. And they have right now, they have the land on the Mount of Olives that has to meet specific criteria. It has to be 5 or 10 meters at eye level with where the temple would have stood. And so they have that land. We talked to the rabbi, his name is Yitzhak Mamo, who owns that land. And now they're preparing the priests who will do the ceremony. It's not a sacrifice, the ceremony of the red heifer. Now, when that ceremony is done and the ashes are ready and the water is purified by the Gihon spring, it's all a step toward building the third temple. And that's why it's so significant. And they thought they would do it last year, October 7th happened, and they're just waiting for the right time. And they're waiting for the priests to be ready. The priests, by the way, are selected so they're not born in a hospital where people can die. They don't go to a cemetery. Some of them, I believe, they don't even walk on the ground because lest they be impure. So there are several, at least young men that are being prepared for that kind of priesthood.
And prepared specifically for the red heifer ceremony. Then there's a whole nother group being prepared for the priesthood.
Yep.
For temple service.
Exactly.
With utensils.
What's that?
With all the utensils.
Yes. They're getting ready to rebuild the third temple.
I have a logistics question. How are those priests getting to the Mount of Olives without going through the cemetery? It's one giant cemetery.
Yeah, there is. That's true. I think the road that goes on the side of the Garden of Gethsemane would keep them away from the cemetery.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's where it is, right there.
Okay.
Gordon Wayne Helm from St. Paul, Minnesota. When I think of the coming election, and I'm wondering which party would be more supportive of Israel. I wonder if you could comment on that.
Aaron's whispering in my ear right now.
But let me just say, for example, CBN News had an article 2 days ago that, here's the headline: Biden reaffirms support for Israel after Iran attack. In the vice presidential debate, Governor Walz was asked if he would support Israel doing a preemptive a strike against nuclear facilities in Iran. He said, well, they have a right to defend themselves. That was his answer, which...
Well, President Biden said no.
I saw that just recently, but
Biden said no.
It seems that the Democratic administration is supportive of Israel. Is that true, or how would you, if you were voting, just on that issue, how would you compare the two parties? That's my question.
Okay, first and foremost, CBN, Operation Blessing, and Regent University as 501c3 organization do not support or oppose the election of any candidate for any office, and apparently this applies worldwide. So we can't even come against President Xi in China. It's an interesting straitjacket we're in. I kept wondering why in the world, when conservatives were in positions of power, they didn't get rid of that rather unusual provision in the IRS code that dates back to Lyndon Johnson. And what happened to Lyndon Johnson was his political opponent created a nonprofit to support his campaign. And so all of his donors got a tax deduction, and Lyndon Johnson's donors didn't get a tax deduction. And so Lyndon Johnson said, this is never going to happen again. And that's why we have the amendment in the 1950s to the tax code. It's interesting how that's been changed and has become sort of I hear it primarily from the left that somehow it's unconstitutional for churches to participate in elections, which is kind of nonsense if you know your American history. So with that as a caution, I'll just sort of stick to the facts. Dearborn, Michigan is absolutely key to the Democrats. And if they don't win the electors from Michigan, Dearborn has a very large Muslim population that they are earnestly trying to appeal to. So take a look at the campaigns and how they're spending money, and specifically the Facebook campaign expenditure in Dearborn, and what are the ads that they're running. And I'll let you come to your own conclusion. There's also some Muslim advisors in the administration that if there's a party that stays in power, will likely become very key at the national security level. And when you look into their background, you find things like president of Students for Palestine while they were in Georgetown University. You really have to look at it. At the same time, there's a group, it's called AIPAC, and they're primarily a Jewish lobbying firm, lobbying organization. They have really targeted and they primaried a lot of pro-Palestinian members of Congress and have defeated them in primary elections. So it can cut both ways, but just if you want to get informed, take a look at those two particular facts. And so who are you getting advice from, and who are you looking at that's currently a deputy national security advisor and potential to become the national security advisor. From an academic standpoint, the credentials are incredible, but when you're president of Students for Palestine, you can kind of figure out ideologically where they're coming from. And then look at the expenditures for social media ads in Dearborn, and it'll give you a very clear picture. And again, we neither oppose or support.
I could add one thing, Gordon.
Sure.
At least from the Israeli point of view, I think I saw a recent poll. I think it was 59 to 37 in support of President Trump, at least from Israelis, and that's how they look at it.
That's significant.
Also, one candidate said he might support an arms embargo against Israel if they were elected. So there's that.
Any non-political question? Did I avoid that enough? You can get Mike. We'll go here first, and then David, come here.
I got a non-political one right here. It's actually going to go to the spiritual side. Through this whole thing, I'm asking the whole panel, has there been pockets of spiritual revival breaking out through the Messianic Jewish community, the Christian community, the Jewish community? And has CBN been able to have a hand through getting Superbook through Israel? And this has this whole thing just enlightened. I know a lot of the Jewish people in Israel are secular. Have you seen an uptick or different pockets of revival and things we can pray for in that department?
Chris, you want to talk about the Messianic community?
Yeah. Well, first I'll talk about the Jewish community. Because of the war in Gaza and because of the war in general, that I think there was a poll in the Jerusalem Post that more people feel closer to God after October 7th than before. There's been stories of miracles inside Gaza with many of the soldiers. And there's been, I would say, a revival of the Jewish faith among many soldiers, both in Gaza. And so I think that is one thing. And they've compared it to what happened after Yom Kippur War in 1973. There was a real revival of the Jewish faith. This dwarfs that, apparently, from my understanding. In terms of the Messianic community, many of the Messianic community are fighting alongside secular Jews, religious Jews, Orthodox Jews, and that has given a credibility of these are men or women that are fighting beside us. And I think that is just goes a long way to bringing the Messianic, the believers, in a whole different light in the Israeli community. It really has makes an impact when you're fighting beside somebody and you're sitting in a tank with 8 other guys, or to be able to either share your faith or they understand exactly where you're coming. So in that regard, I think there is a change going on.
Talk about the prayer meeting that was called to pray for the hostages.
Yeah, well, there's been actually a number of prayer meetings that have been at the Western Wall on behalf of the hostages, and literally tens of thousands will come to the Western Wall, fill the plaza all the way up to the wall itself, and to cry out to God. The depth of the faith is really extraordinary, and I in some ways, I'm like Gordon. The more I learn about the Jewish faith, it's really so rich and biblical. I mean, there's much that is rabbinical, that is extra biblical, but they love God, and they don't know of a revelation of Yeshua yet, Jesus, but they do love God. And the prayer meetings are really moving to see, inspiring to see them crying out and weeping before God that the hostages would be released, the soldiers would be protected, and that there would be unity among the Jewish people.
Well, I keep pointing them to Isaiah 12. With joy, you will draw water from the wells of salvation, and God will become your salvation. They're all praying Psalm 130 this week, and that has, God will provide for us. So.
Let me just add one thing that we have anecdotally is that there'll be Jews that will come up to me only because maybe I'm on air, but it's really for all of the Bureau and all of us. And they just say, thank you. Thank you for the way you're reporting and telling the truth about what's happening in Israel. And to us, I mean, as the Bureau, we hear that and it's so gratifying. And that we could be standing on the shoulders of Pat, and because of your efforts and support, we get to be there, and it's really just a privilege to be there, and to what Aaron does, to be right amongst the Israeli people and do what CBN tells the story that you're going to see the genius of Israel.
Do you ever think about, after 2,000 years of division and pogroms and all the horror that's gone on between Christians and Jews, do you ever stop and think, like, it's so amazing that we get to be at this moment and be reconnecting in this way?
Oh,
I mean,
amazing,
it really
yeah.
is, it's crazy.
Because there's such a 2,000-year history of persecution, pogroms, and of Christians against the Jewish people. So they almost in their DNA have a built-up resistance to Christians. And to see what happened at Regent University with Ambassador Friedman, this is groundbreaking stuff. I mean, that they would feel the connection and to pray with us or work with us, advocate with us, and tell the story with us. It is extraordinary.
And he insisted, according to Michelle, that he chose Regent. He reached out to us, which was, wow. All right, I realize I stand between everyone and dessert. And following dessert, we're going to have the genius of Israel. I don't think it's in this ballroom, right? Are we moving? No one knows?
To a third location?
It's going to be here. Okay, so you're going to come back here and watch the movie. Before I turn it back over to the dancing one. Chris, would you lead us in a prayer for Israel?
Wow. Father, we do consider it such an honor and a privilege and a responsibility to be here for such a time as this, to be able to stand with the Jewish people, to stand with Israel while they go through the worst time since the Holocaust and surrounded by enemies, not only around the state of Israel, but throughout the world where the Jewish people are being demonized. So, Father, I pray that you would help us all fulfill that vow that Pat made in 1974, I believe, on the Mount of Olives, to always stand with the Jewish people. And I pray that this is our Dietrich Bonhoeffer moment, that we would stand and keep our eyes fixed on you, because you're the author and the finisher of our faith. I pray for Gordon, that you would continue to bless him as he comments on the C100 Club. Pray for Erin, that you would bless her and the continued production of the oracles of God. I pray for Michelle Bachman as she leads Regent University. And Lord, for all of us, for CBN News as well, and CBN International, Father, we are here before you're coming. And we want to be ready, and we want to be faithful to you so we can finish the task that you've given each one of us, and the task of CBN to prepare the nations of the world for the coming of Jesus Christ and the establishment of his kingdom on the earth. And what a privilege we have to be here for such a time as this. Help us, Lord, with our finances, with our prayers, with our actions. Be faithful to you so that when we see you face to face, you'll be able to say to us, well done, good and faithful servants, enter into the joy of your Lord. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.